Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at another horrific case with you, love under duress. The famous adage, a broken vase can never be repaired, refers to irreversible hurt or betrayal. A fragile vessel may be repaired, but its flaws remain, permanently affecting its appearance and utility. This connection is particularly relevant for survivors of intimate exploitation. Historically, our society has frequently attempted to minimize the agony of such situations in order to prevent bringing misery to others. Nonetheless, our culture and legal systems have changed. Individuals who have endured these indignities are now sharing their tales and receiving the assistance they require, prompted by tragic situations that could not be overlooked. Among these is the horrific incident of Antonia Berra of Chile, around which the whole national community rallied to ensure justice was done against her assailant. The young woman's death was reported on the evening of October 13, 2019. Her family could never have imagined how the day would end. Her sister Carla, who was visiting their parents' house, walked upstairs to greet Antonia, expecting a pleasant conversation. Carla chose not to disturb her when she appeared to be sleeping and went to the door. Before she could depart, she heard Antonia inquire about their mother and beg that the lights be turned out. After telling Carla she loved her, Antonia turned away. Carla considered the possibility that she was simply tired or unmotivated. Antonia had no idea she was dealing with terrifying ideas that left her feeling as if there was only one way out of her deep distress. By 7 o'clock that evening, their mother had entered Antonia's room after not hearing an answer. Her daughter remained still, floating above the floor. Marcela hurried to her, but there were no indications of life. She sought help from neighbors after being overwhelmed by shock. The family friends assisted in the removal of the body and contacted for emergency services. Shortly after, Alejandro Berra spoke to the media, vowing to investigate the underlying causes of his daughter's desperate deed and seek justice. Antonia, known for her vivacity and brilliance, had clearly been deeply affected by something serious. The autopsy proved that self-strangulation was the cause of death. The case necessitated rapid response. Instead of waiting for governmental inquiries, the parents conducted their own investigation. Private detectives methodically put together Antonia's final days, pinpointing the person who had pushed her to despair. Alejandro and Marcela immediately reported Martin Perdinez to the police, suspecting him of exploitation. There is little information about him. He was born and raised in Temuco, Chile, the same city as Antonia. He came from a huge family, including parents, a sister, and a brother. The dynamics among his family are unknown because there is little material available online, which is explained later. Undoubtedly, in his youth, a young woman named Daniela Alvarez bore him a child. Nonetheless, the two's relationship did not survive very long. After the couple split up, detectives determined that Antonia and Martin communicated using a social media platform from 2015 to 2017 to 2017. Antonia was a teenager back then. They sent messages and commented on each other's images, but their interactions were limited to the digital sphere. However, they eventually met in person, resulting in a fatal outcome. Antonia was born in the late 1980s into a supportive and close-knit family. The Berra family's home was huge and roomy, suitable for their size. Alejandro and Marcela, loving parents, reared 5 children, 4 daughters and a son. There was a lot of care and attention in this household. The children were kind and well-behaved, causing no major problems. However, Antonia stood out from her siblings. She was extremely sensitive, responsible, and ambitious from an early age, and her parents were very proud of her. She succeeded in school, got along well with her teachers, and had goals for the future. Antonia wanted to travel and live a full life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in her preferred university and began studying a highly sought-after degree. As a freshman, she immersed herself in learning the fundamentals of her future career, while also actively participating in academic and social events, making new acquaintances. Her buddies shared her interests and goals. Antonia developed a very close friendship with Consuelo Uribe, who was attending law school. The pals would frequently hang out, shop, and attend events together. They became quite close. Thus, when Antonia broke up with her lover Rodrigo, Consuela suggested she distract herself from the pain. Antonia was hurting with the split, so she accepted her friend's suggestion. She wished to clear her thoughts and temporarily forget the past. The buddies arranged a trip for Chile's Independence Day, September 18. Their goal was the vacation village of Pucón. By chance, Martin and Antonia's paths intersected again. Martin planned to attend an electronic music event. The event was scheduled to take place at a local club called Black Room, where a DJ buddy of his would perform. On September 17th, at around 6:30 p.m., Uribe and Berra left for Pucón with 3 other companions, one of whom was Consuela's boyfriend. The flight went smoothly, and once there, the young folks stayed in various accommodations. The girls remained in the Uribe family's summer cottage. After 8 p.m., the buddies started preparing for a party at the popular venue, Black Room. The night promised a plethora of memorable feelings. Before departing, Antonia messaged her father, who advised her to be cautious among strangers. In response, she reassured her father, stating that discretion was her most important trait. Law enforcement investigators interviewed Martin Pertines several times, but he denied any misconduct in relation to Antonia. He insisted their contact was consensual and denied any involvement in her tragic death. However, detectives had their own point of view and evidence on the case. During the investigation, it was discovered that Martin left Temuco on September 17th, about midday, with friends. They planned to return the next day. When the group arrived at their location, they had a party in a rented house, complete with talk, jokes, and, of course, drink. Meanwhile, Antonia and Consuela prepared and headed to the club. They ordered a table, food, and beverages. The pals had a great time conversing and dancing together. Needless to say, the Black Room Club became the setting for the young people's unexpected reunion. The fortuitous meeting delighted them, and the couple spent the evening speaking and dancing. They were clearly fond of one another. Antonia occasionally left him to return to her buddy, who was also having a good time, and to welcome the male acquaintances she had met while traveling. Moving from one pub to the next, she had no idea how drunk she had become, most likely due to the long drive and an empty stomach, something she rarely allowed herself. Consuela discovered her companion speaking happily with a mutual acquaintance, Emilio, around 6:45 a.m. She informed Antonia it was time to depart. Antonia refused, feeling good and eager to continue the evening. Her companion persuaded her to stop drinking and reconsider her decision, but Antonia refused and chose to remain at the club as Consuela left. Antonia later regretted her decision. Emilio was an inadvertent witness to the events that followed, which he described during the investigation and in court. He noticed Martin approaching Antonia and starting a discussion with her. He then took her by the hand and guided her to the exit. Emilio observed that Antonia acted strangely, unclear whether she was participating in the conversation or simply confused due to the booze. Nonetheless, it appeared that she did not mind being brought away, or maybe she was oblivious of it. Emilio assumed the man had requested her to join him, and she accepted. However, exterior surveillance footage revealed a different reality. Martin's companions said that they left the club in 2 automobiles, but neither had enough room for the 2 of them. They so started on foot. Along the way, they stumbled across a shop. Surveillance footage revealed that the male forced the woman into entering. She struggled to stand and couldn't resist. Martin, who had become slightly more sober, was able to exert some control over the situation. They were photographed multiple times throughout the night. Along the way, Pertines became overly amorous and attempted to kiss his buddy, who did not reciprocate and tried to pull away. Upon entering the rented home, none of his buddies paid much attention to the woman. Only 19-year-old Barbara, who had just joined and had not been drinking, recognized the pair was inebriated. Then they headed upstairs. Consuela received a voice message from her pal at around 9 a.m. Initially, she couldn't understand what was being said. After paying closer attention, she understood a few words. Antonia pleaded to be taken up. Her companion did not know her specific location, so she utilized GPS to find it. Consuela, followed by her lover Jose, arrived at the scheduled spot. When they entered the house, They were greeted by a nude Martin who was covering himself with a pillow. Consuela asked him where her friend was, and he said he didn't know. They discovered Barbara in one of the upstairs rooms, laying on a bed in her knickers and quietly crying. Josie grabbed her up and brought her to the car. Consuela questioned what had occurred, but Antonia could only cry. The young pair attempted to console her by hugging her and engaging her in conversation. Back at the summer house, Antonia revealed everything. Martin had exploited her against her will, and she felt helpless to stop it. Her memory was foggy. She couldn't remember much, but one thing was certain. After that, he left her alone and disappeared. When Josie and Consuela learned about the event, that Antonia denounced the rascal to the police and seek justice. She refused, worried that her parents and the public would find out. She decided to quietly absorb the shock and try to rehabilitate on her own. She asked them not to tell anyone about the incident. During this deep talk, Antonia received a message from her father, who asked how she was and joked about whether she had been drinking too much. To avoid generating suspicion, she attempted to react in her customary style, unintentionally revealing her own goals. The next day, Antonia met with Martin to discuss things, but he was dismissive and arrogant. He asserted that the prior night's actions had been consensual. Antonia realized at that time that she would not be told the truth or given an apology. She realized she needed to try to move on. Later, psychotherapists brought to the court hearing will explain that Antonia was suffering from intimacy trauma syndrome. It is distinguished by changes in physical, emotional, cognitive, and interpersonal behavior. This condition can occur soon after the incident or months, even years later. The poor girl was going through an awful stage alone. She couldn't get rid of the disturbing sensations, distraction, anxiety, and perplexity, which alternated with hysterics and tears. She undoubtedly had a compulsive desire to cleanse herself, with spells of nausea and even vomiting. For 3 weeks, Bara remained mute and attempted to act normally. A childhood buddy said that she hadn't seen anything peculiar about her. Her classmates, however, were unable to overlook the syndrome's memory problems and disorganization. One of them remarked on her deteriorating academic performance, which was unusual for the formerly diligent student. When asked about the cause, Antonia mentioned bad health. It should be emphasized that numerous witnesses, including friends, acquaintances, and classmates, testified for the defense during the trial. But what was the tipping point in reaching a disastrous decision? Without a chain of events, Antonia may still be alive and seeking expert care. Her dreadful secret eventually became known to an ex-boyfriend. However, the information reached him in an unpleasant form, which he hurriedly reported. The girl responded that she was not to blame for what transpired. His information was grossly exaggerated. Rodrigo didn't believe her. Furthermore, the day before the incident, Martin contacted. It is unknown what their communication comprised, although it may have included threats from his side. One thing is certain: the girl was not present the following day. A few hours before her death, she sent a last message to her partner and posted a childhood video on a family chat. Antonia was dancing and laughing happily, demonstrating how much she missed her previous self. She couldn't go back to her old way of life, attitudes, and behaviors. This incident left a significant mark. Her tragedy resonated with the public because Alejandro found the courage to share his daughter's tale across the country. Antonia's name appeared on posters, and social media hashtags, and even on building walls. The public's backing yielded tremendous results. In less than a week, several women filed similar allegations against Pranes. 6 fresh allegations were filed against him, covering conduct he committed from 2010 to 2019. The individual was identified as a criminal and arrested. Concurrently, Martin's family filed a petition to preserve their personal information, which had been released online. The family claimed that their fundamental right to honor and respect for private life had been violated, citing countless insults, violent remarks, and false information posted online. The Pradenas family, along with the Bara family, suspected each other of these activities. On June 12, 2020, the Temuco court approved their request. The judge ordered Antonia's relatives to avoid from exposing information about the assailant's family on social media and from publishing compromising material. This decision has aroused uproar. Chileans were outraged, believing that it shielded Martin. On July 21st, the Berra family filed an appeal with the Supreme Court, which was denied. Later that month, the suspect's lawyer filed a petition for protective measures for his client. In the same month, he was officially charged with multiple attacks. The public outcry was gathering momentum. In Chile, the investigation became known as the Antonia case, which represents the restoration of justice for victims of assault. Many women, after many years, dared to speak out about their experiences. On July 22nd, an unexpected thing happened. The court amended the previously ordered preventive measure from detention to house arrest. Martin Pradenas was effectively freed. At the same time, the judge clarified that this does not summarize the assumed punishment. Meanwhile, the prosecutor accused Martin of 5 acts of misbehavior, but the court only admitted 2. Massive protests erupted across the country. Thousands of people flocked to the streets, enraged by the termination of inquiries into certain facts and the decision to place people under house arrest. The authorities assisted the citizens by submitting a request to the appellate court. The judiciary reacted promptly. It revoked the selected preventive measure and detained Martin. The same court later overturned the statute of limitations in 2 cases involving interpersonal violence. Concurrently, Alejandro collaborated with feminist organizations to write a bill outlining consequences for such offenses. He emphasized that no one should be apathetic when a man leads a woman away without resisting, especially when intoxicated. Berra emphasized the significance of taking appropriate action in such circumstances. The investigation continues because a lady could be a victim in this situation. In February 2021, Martin's phone was discovered. Forensic examination discovered that it contained images of the accused wearing women's pants. He was evidently proud of his accomplishments and appeared to keep account. The police report was approximately 400 pages long and included testimony from victims and witnesses, as well as others who were close to Martin and Antonia and knew them from childhood. The accused's childhood teacher described Pradenas as a bright and joyful child who was particularly interested in intimacy, related themes. Some ladies remembered him touching them as children. At the time, no one gave it any attention because they were all children. On June 14, 2022, the criminal court in Temuco began its proceedings, which were projected to last more than a month. Throughout this time, the prosecution presented a variety of evidence, expert testimony, and witness statements. The camera footage revealed that Antonia was unable to control the situation. On August 26, Martin was sentenced to 20 years in jail for crimes against intimacy and intimate related assault. On December 29, the Supreme Court upheld the defense's appeal, which disagreed with the verdict. A new trial is anticipated during April 2023. Meanwhile, the Berra family's efforts yielded results. Antonia's law was drafted, expanding existing legislation to ensure that anyone committing an act of violence that caused the victim to commit suicide would be sentenced to jail. On March 16, the defendant's legal team quit, and the matter was turned over to public defense. Finally, on April 24, 2024, the second trial began for 5 counts of assault and 2 cases of coerced intimacy. During this point, Pradenas forfeited his right to remain silent and revealed what happened. He claimed that his crimes were committed while severely intoxicated, to which the prosecutor countered that, by drinking with the women, he made the victims susceptible. On July 7, 2023, he was found guilty. The federal prosecutor sought a sentence of 41 years in prison. On July 28, 2023, Martin Pradenas, 31, was sentenced to 17 years in jail for 7 intimate-related offenses against 6 victims. Given the time he has already spent in detention, he will spend 14 years. Antonia Berra's tragic death helped to uncover a dangerous perpetrator. It is unclear how many more innocent ladies may have suffered as a result of his activities. The border between harassment and flirtation is incredibly narrow. One can never be ready for someone to cross that deadly boundary. However, societal developments have shifted the perception of victims of violence. Everyone now realizes the dangers of unrestrained impulses and the inability to control oneself. Finally, another person's body and soul are as fragile as